It's like 1,000,000 degrees outside, and I've probably bought one of the hottest graphics cards ever to exist. Well, I'm not sure about that, actually. It's no 480, I don't think, but anyway. Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now, it seems like it's been a while since we've taken a look back at an older graphics card. So earlier this week I set myself a budget of $10 US, which is roughly £8 at the time of recording, and decided to try and find something that could play a few esports and popular online titles such as... I couldn't remember the name of anything then. The card I have picked, well, just so happens to be one of these. This is an XFX GTX 275. Now, we tested a card like this, I believe the MSI Lightning version, a couple of years ago, but a lot has changed since then. Not in terms of drivers, because this card last got updated driver-wise in 2016, but in terms of the games and their updates, things like that. So today I thought we'd take a look, see how this card handles a few of these modern titles and generally see what it can do in 2020. Now, of course, the GTX 275 comes from the 200 series lineup, which does lack DX11 support. That came in with the 400 series, so it is going to be lacking right off the bat in terms of support for some of those latest and greatest titles. Let's talk about the card a little more and then get into its performance. So hot. So this XFX 275 certainly looks the part and feels just as plasticky as you would expect any card of this age to. It's got 240 shaders, a 670 MHz clock speed, and 896 megabytes of GDDR3. It also runs fairly warm at idle thanks to the blower style single fan cooler, though it isn't overly noisy by any means. If you want to use one of these wall mold beasts in your system, then you'll also need two 6-pin connectors, and I'd suggest a 550 watt power supply. If you're wondering why I sometimes use dollars in the titles of these videos, well, it's not just because most of you guys watching are from the States, it also gives me more of a challenge. $10 works out at just over £8 at the time of recording, so I had an even tighter budget to work with. Installing the latest supported drivers 342.01 meant that for some reason my big display refused to show a picture. Instead, we had to switch to this tiny 1360 by 768 monitor, which will probably help out, to be honest, as 1080p on a card like this might be out of reach, even with older games. So let's get into... Alright, so I guess Fortnite is off the table. Not to worry, I mean, who even plays this game, right? So what about Overwatch? Well, no joy here either. I think both of these games did support DX10 at one point. Maybe it's DX 10.1 I'm thinking of. They still might, but the problem with the 275 is that it only supports DX 10.0. So on that terrible disappointment, it's time to end. Or we'll just try a few other games. If any of you are up for a bit of classic Black Ops multiplayer, then fortunately you'll be able to run it with the extra settings and anti-aliasing off. 91 FPS was the average. It also seems to be the frame rate cap. Not a bad start if you don't count the whole Fortnite and Overwatch thing. The game turned meme, Crysis, also runs flawlessly at high settings. Even in 2020 the game looks nice, though as I sit here in my hot office during a rare but relentless British heatwave, I can't help but wish I was really on a tropical island surrounded by beautiful water. 62 FPS was the average, though the 0.1% low on screen reflects a brief stutter during an auto-save moment. Different levels of the game may give you different results, especially the Ascension level, but during the first 30 minutes everything runs fairly smoothly. Now, did I dream it, or is there supposed to be a remastered version of this game coming out this year? If so, that'll be interesting to see whether or not the performance differs, and if so, by how much. That was actually quite silly. I know it's going to differ quite significantly, in fact, but whether it will still support older graphics cards, DX10 and 10.1 cards, remains to be seen. My estimate would be that definitely not. I can't imagine that the remastered version of Crysis will support older cards. So yeah, if it does, that would be amazing, but I don't think there'd be any visual benefit as far as playing the remastered version goes over the original in that case. I think we're going to see a fully fledged DX11 or DX12 remaster, and I think it's going to look absolutely fantastic, and it's going to spark that meme once again, that can it run Crysis meme. CSGO is more CPU intensive, so as long as you've got a graphics card that's working and is faster than a toaster, then the game should run quite well. The 275 is of course paired with the Ryzen 3100 and 16 gigs of 3200 MHz DDR4. It's unrealistic, I know, but it means that we can squeeze every last drop of performance from this sub 1GB gaming card. Now you may be wondering why some of the figures on screen don't reflect the gameplay. You might be seeing slightly lower figures with the gameplay, and to be honest, I had to record internally today using MSI Afterburner. Now with my external capture box, the graphics card would not work. Again, another downside of using such an old card in 2020, I guess, if you want to record and upload gameplay, though doing so through something like MSI Afterburner will work fine. You also cannot take advantage of things like Nvidia's Shadow Play because this card does not support it. The current driver version, the 2016 version of the drivers for this card, obviously does not support Shadow Play. So again, another downside. But apart from that, recording with MSI Afterburner works fine. It's more CPU intensive, but it does mean that the frame rate may dip a little bit in those CPU intensive games. So the gameplay may not always be reflective of the actual performance throughout today. I just wanted to let you know because I did have some issues as far as recording each of these games went. At this low resolution, GTA 5 also runs very well indeed with the lowest or normal settings. I would also estimate that 1080p should produce at least 30 FPS, maybe even closer to 60, but I don't want to make any promises. Here I was running around the busy downtown area of Los Santos, and despite all the goings on, 70 frames per second was the average. This should increase as you make your way toward the countryside, but you should get a decent experience wherever you are on the map with this decade-old GPU. GTA 5's predecessor, GTA 4, doesn't fare as well. Although we were using medium settings at the same low resolution, and although the average frame rate wasn't too bad, the constant stutter and freezes rendered it unplayable. I still love GTA 4, despite its performance problems. I can never accurately estimate how this is going to run before starting it up, as it varies so much from hardware to hardware. Not only is it still a good game in my opinion, but it still looks pretty good with the settings cranked up too. We can't do that with this card of course, so just take my word for it. Now I was very surprised after Rust started up problem free, so surprised that I filmed it starting on this card just to make sure I wasn't seeing things. With the graphics preset set to 2, which as you can see probably isn't that visually appealing, the game ran with 40 frames per second, at least in less dense areas. This figure may be severely impacted depending on where you are and what you're doing, but either way I was quite surprised that it started up and ran as well as it did. You may have also noticed that the card gets up to around 85 degrees Celsius, so it's not too hot by any means or loud. On a scale of hairdryer in a neighbouring room to Boeing 747 at the end of your bed, well, the acoustics put this thing at the lower end of that scale. Finally, it's Saints Row 3, not the remaster but the original. High settings were probably a tad ambitious, but even so 30 FPS was doable with the GTX 275. Low or medium would have been a far better bet though, and I'd say that this 1360 by 768 resolution was ideal for this card throughout, to be honest. If like me you can find one for less than a tenner and want to play GTA 5 or CSGO, then it's definitely suitable for that, but only if you don't mind lower settings in the former. Of course, buying a card that doesn't support DX11 isn't the most sensible thing to do because a lot of games won't work in 2020, but that's why these cards can potentially be found at such low prices. So there we go, the GTX 275 in 2020. Is it a capable card? Well, in some games it can still handle itself. GTA 5, CSGO, they're going to run okay as long as you have a decent CPU to pair it with. 16 gigs of RAM and a Ryzen 3 3100 are probably both unrealistic in terms of a real-world pairing, but as I said before, we pair cards like this with modern powerful CPUs to make sure that they are reaching their maximum potential. My advice, to be honest, would be to look out for what else you can find that supports DX11 at this price point. Say if you see a GTX 275 for £30, dollars or euros, see what sort of DX11 cards you can find at that price because you won't regret it, and make sure that the performance of those cards is equal or better, as you'll probably be able to run a lot more titles, especially with that newer DirectX support. With all that said then, thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, leave a like on it down below. Leave a dislike if you didn't. Let me know if you're still using one of these old school 200 series Nvidia cards in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.